Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome everybody joining the DataON Virtual Academy webinar series. Believe it or not, this is the fourth webinar we've done in 4 weeks, and given all the challenges we have with the COVID-19, I think this is a great way for us to engage and talk to our customers on a proactive basis. Excited as always. We have a very exciting topic today, which to me is very important to our customers, especially the state local government customer that we deal with, where in the past we really talked about the infrastructure of Azure Stack HCI for Microsoft. But today our topic is about data security governance, enterprise continuity, and how we leverage our partners and technology to deliver that solution for our customers. So when DataON goes to a customer, we not only deliver a infrastructure for your production workload, we also think about data security, backup, and DR for the customer. So today's conversation and webinar, we brought in the experts from Veeam. We brought in our partners who actually are really good at executing the solution, and to share with you the best practice we have done in terms of that particular topic. So I'm going to go forward and talk about what our key agenda today. So we have two key speakers today for talk about the solution and data security governance and business continuity. We have Benjamin Clemens, who is the president of Strategic Online Systems. He's also an expert, and he knows how to deploy solution. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he's been a great partner of DataON to continue to deliver services for our customer. We also have Andy Perkins from Veeam, who also was part of the big project we worked on for a big SLED customer in Texas, and we're really applying a great technology from Veeam into the design we have to deliver that continuous data security and backup and DR for our customers. So they will share their example, share the technology, and share the best practices and what it takes to deliver that solution for you and our customer base. Some housekeeping items. Please mute your speaker during the webinar, so there's no background. We do have some Twitters if you need to reach us, and you have a Q&A section that's open as well. Without further ado, let me just kickstart the big picture of a hybrid cloud journey, and I start this with all the Virtual Academy webinar series. It's important to know that even though we talk about production workload, infrastructure, software defined, there's still a big picture of hybrid cloud that you need to look at, and why we believe these are the key decision-making factors that IT decision maker like yourself need to look at. And as you decide on the infrastructure and backup DR, you need to understand how these impact your legacy apps infrastructure. Whether or not these workloads get sit in the cloud or really sit on-premise, because they're different. I use the example of many of our customers that have SQL workload for databases. They want to have information closer to them, so they will put the databases and SQL workload close to them on-premise. But they may have a lot of backup storage that they want to just have blob storage. They may put on the cloud for file backup. So really, depending on your company and your strategy, you could decide what is the right hybrid cloud balance for your company. As you go through that decision process, making sure that the security aspect of it is taken care of, making sure the data integrity aspect of it, and leveraging the technology we have from Microsoft with Azure Stack HCI to accomplish those. But as you go through it, you're looking at the emerging technologies such as container and Kubernetes versus virtual machines, right? Can you leverage this new technology like container, which we will have a discussion as part of our academy to talk about containers to see how that benefits your environment. Finally, to deliver that hybrid cloud with Microsoft and Azure is kind of the direction we believe the future holds. Some numbers, clearly the number is huge, right? The size of the hyper-converged infrastructure continue to grow to billions and billions of dollars, and 12 billion is the current forecast from IDC. Kubernetes as a new app modernization technology is growing as well. You see that IT decision makers like yourself are looking at a strategy of on-premise hybrid cloud, and a lot of them are making that as a decision factors. Data continue to grow at an exponential rate. How do you make sure you can leverage and tier that data in your infrastructure using cloud as an option? And lastly is really looking at, as you look at infrastructure refresh, what are the key decision factors you need to make in that process? As we drill down into the infrastructure side of it, you'll see that we believe Microsoft, especially the Microsoft technology, is really a good option for you to consider. Azure is one of the leading technology vendors for cloud, public cloud, but at the same time, Microsoft has a lot of great solutions for your on-premise because we know and we understand that not everything will go to the cloud. But in that process, how do we ensure that transition is viable for you? So Microsoft introduced the concept of Azure Arc in Ignite last year, which is a way for you to, one, support not just Microsoft as a single cloud, but support a multi-cloud environment with Azure Arc. That's number one. At the same time, as you look at on-premise, the same technology could be a management platform to manage your on-premise Azure Stack HCI to run your workload on-premise. And at the same time, you have a lot of solutions on the edge where you have multiple sites across the world, across the United States that you want to manage. And Microsoft delivered that solution as well as a edge solution infrastructure called Azure Stack HCI for the edge. But as you look at your infrastructure from the cloud hybrid, clearly you can never take your eye away from the data governance side of it, making sure your data is secure, backup, DR. And today, our focus is on this topic especially, on data governance. And DataON continue to help our customer to address this topic, and today we're doing that. And clearly, Azure Stack HCI is one of the solutions we continue to improve and help our customer base, and we'll talk about that. And you have heard many webinars on that topic as well, and DataON will continue to innovate on Azure Stack HCI. Azure and Microsoft is not a new technology. It is absolutely becoming mainstream. We have many, many customers on Azure Stack HCI who's running their production workload, who's running the edge, who's running their converged storage, SQL workload, VDI on top, and these span across multiple verticals, cloud, education, state, local government, financial, manufacturing, medical. So you can see the adoption of Microsoft Azure Stack HCI in the hybrid cloud platform across all the customer bases. And Microsoft stated earlier last year that they have 30,000 enabled clusters. So it is becoming a mainstream solution for our enterprise customers. As a last slide to set it up, I think it's important to understand that when we look at data governance and DataON, we're really looking at what is the best practices to deploy that solution and what technology we need to use to deploy that solution for backup and security. And we have, as we engage with the customer, it's important to understand it's not just a one-size-fits-all. It's just not one technology solve everything. You need to really look across the organization to understand the people, the process, the technology, and how to put it all together to make sure that as you integrate these processes that you're delivering enterprise-level security for data integrity. You're making sure that as you deliver that infrastructure, you are protecting your internal data, also protecting yourself from external threats like ransomware, which is rampant right now, right? There isn't a single solution fits all. It is a multiple layer solution, and we'll describe how that works. But finally, the key is making sure as you go through the data governance and migrating data, updating your data, backing up your data, you're really bridging the legacy infrastructure to make sure the application itself are ready for the hybrid cloud and on-premise solutions. All these are decisions you have to make that will drill down to the next level of detail today to help you go into that path and go into the hybrid cloud journey with DataON. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Andy, who's from Veeam, who will talk about the Veeam and their solution. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Howard. I'm going to assume everybody can hear me. So we did some tests before, so we're good to go. Just real quick, thanks for that introduction, Howard. Again, guys, my name is Andy Perkins. I'm a systems engineer with Veeam Software. I have been with Veeam for about a year now. I do live here in Houston, Texas, so I do cover public sector as well as commercial accounts in the state of Texas as well as Louisiana, and kind of outside a little bit there. Just fun fact for me, I've actually was a Veeam customer end user with Veeam for about 3.5 years prior to joining Veeam, and I do have about a good solid decade of IT experience through education, Fortune 500 and enterprise accounts, and wore many hats in the process, right? I've certainly used many backup softwares as well, although I can't say, given the opportunity to work for a backup software company that wasn't Veeam, I don't think I would have taken kind of a leap of faith to, kind of leave my cozy IT job. So it's just really exciting to be with Veeam again. So exciting to see where it has been from an end user as well as where it's going in just in the past year or so with Veeam. So with all that said, enough about me. Today I just want to briefly touch high level about what Veeam is. We've been out for a while, so many of you all may have heard of Veeam, but for some who may have not heard of us, we just kind of want to briefly cover who we are and kind of how we fit into the DataON platform, and really just kind of bring a better together feel for the customer, and as well as our alliances and partners as well. So with all that said, who is Veeam? Veeam is, simply put, we're a software company. Veeam is a software data protection or backup company, and we were actually founded in 2006, but we didn't ship our first product out until 2008. And our first flagship product was Veeam Backup and Replication 1.0. And kind of interesting about Veeam, we were really just focused on being an agentless backup solution for VMware workloads, right? So kind of the problem, virtualization is really starting to take off. The problem that we're solving is that, we don't have to put an in-guest agent on each VM just to protect them, right? We can actually pull this data from a hypervisor level, and thus minimizing the way things can fall through cracks, because it's very easy to spin up a VM. But, if we have to put an agent and add it to a backup job and go through these additional steps, like I said, things can fall through cracks. And really, we're just integrating with the hypervisor, the APIs provided, and we're creating a snapshot or checkpoint, mounting up that data, and really just moving it as a standalone dedupe compressed file to a target, right? So this is 2008. We had huge success, but the important thing to know is we've continued to evolve and grow since 2006, right? We've certainly perfected, Hyper-V backups, physical servers, even Nutanix AHV, moving on to AWS, Azure, software as a service like O365, your NAS data, and really just the story keeps continuing to grow, what we protect, right? So that's high level what Veeam is. In the numbers, pretty good. At Veeam, we love to show this marketing slide, and I apologize if you've seen it. We show it all the time, but really the story here is that we have over 375,000 customers worldwide, over $1 billion in revenue as of last year. So for us as a software company, that's pretty good number for us, good milestone, especially for backup software. And, we just have very high ratings, right? We have a very high net promotion score that rivals even on the Amazon and Netflix scale, right? So lots of recurring revenue, lots of repeat business, and we continue to grow, right? And, just to kind of, put things in perspective, right? Just keep in mind, we build all our software in-house, There's no one feature that we're going to go outsource to get that feature, right? So everything we create is proprietary to us. So it's actually very special, right, in a way, right? We have a very flat organization, to people like me out in the field supporting customers, to our support, all the way up to R&D, right? Pretty flat organization, to where we're pushing solutions all the way up to R&D. We're not having to make things complex. With that said, do want to call your attention top left of this slide. This does say our HQ is in the U.S., to be determined location. We were actually acquired, I believe it was the start of this year, at the end of last, by a Data Insight. This is a venture capitalist firm who's actually worked with Veeam for many years, almost since the inception of Veeam. But really, they've privately valued us at $5 billion, and really is injecting us to get to the next level, right? We were number one in EU for years, but really just moving our headquarters, which was originally in Bar, Switzerland. They moved us over to the United States, And really just for us to really get to number one for our enterprise customers, federal SLED space as well. So really just taking us across the goal line there. So our HQ will probably be in one of our existing support centers, probably in Atlanta, Georgia, possibly Columbus, Ohio. That's kind of what the grapevine is saying, but we'll have yet to find out. So all good there. Moving on, more than 10 years of innovation. Since 2008, we're moving on, right? Since Veeam 1.0 in 2008, we've continued to add and implement features. And again, just kind of going back on, these are features that Veeam built and implements and improves and innovates, right? We're not in a lot of cases, we're not catching up. And a lot of times we're innovating and strengthening our technology. So with all that said, we're now in 2020 Q2. We just did release a version 10 Veeam, which is probably our long-awaited version 10 upgrade. We've actually been waiting for this for years. So lots to be said about that, but really exciting release there. And the show kind of keeps moving on. It's really exciting to see. Moving forward to my next slide here. This is a nice wedding cake slide, guys. And since we're a software company, we consider ourselves storage agnostic, hardware agnostic, but at the same time, given that we give the customer the greatest of flexibility, right? We can really start working on anything that you have on the floor today. You're not limited to a certain set of hardware or a specific label, right? And then we really kind of don't care where your data lives. So the idea is that we're protecting you from the bare metal up to the OS, to the application, and then giving you granularity to recover from an entire item, or is it just a single file or table or object in your database, right? So virtual physical cloud, SaaS, now NAS, we really don't care. So talked about a little bit about myself, kind of where we're coming from, but let's talk about our vision of Veeam, where we're headed, where we see ourselves in the future. And really that is to be the most trusted provider of backup solutions that deliver cloud data management. So just like to call out one thing, to be the most trusted provider, right? That means a lot. We talk about our trust, and really that kind of aligns to our slide when we say 375,000 customers worldwide, right? We develop that trust, but not only from the marketing numbers, the technology we provide to ensure that trust in our backup solution. And then if you see that we highlight backup, pretty important here, right? Because Veeam has always identified as a backup solution, and we will continue to do so. And just as an example, right, maybe other providers started off maybe some newcomers started off in this space where maybe they're going to be a storage platform first, and then maybe they want to tack on a backup solution at the end of it. There's kind of a identity crisis of who are they trying to be, right? Are they just trying to do what the market says or tells them to do? For us, it's just exciting to give you the greatest of flexibility, but giving you that trust that we are going to back up your systems. And we're going to deliver this cloud data management, this concept of protecting your data wherever it lives, right? To Howard's point, not everything is going to the cloud, but for Veeam, we don't care if it's going to the cloud. Maybe 10% of it, maybe 99% of it is. Where that data lives, we're going to protect it. And that's this idea of cloud. It's really more of a service delivery more than a place, right? So we just want to manage your cloud data wherever it lives. And so the way we do that, and we continue to do that, we believe in these three tenets at Veeam: simple, flexible, and reliable. So simple, right? Simple enough that I can use. I was a customer in an enterprise. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I was able to pick it up very quickly. I didn't have a PhD in backups. I've used a lot of other backup software, but Veeam was by far some of the easiest stuff to use. But more importantly, if I was not on call or, it's the weekend vacation, it's simple enough that I could hand it over to my colleague, or even my boss could restore a file or VM if need be. But simplicity also speaks to, it may be simple, but it's also extremely flexible, right? So Veeam started off in this SMB space, but because it's software defined, it's scalable to the largest and most complex of environments, right? Especially in enterprise, coming from one, it's just been incredible how we can actually protect your data and expand and scale wherever your data lives. But what good is, protecting your data without a reliable backup? Let me went forward too quick. Reliability, right? Again, on that trust, the discussion of trust and being a reliable backup provider, we talk about the numbers, but, what good is a backup if we don't have the technology to prove it? We don't want to be in a state where never knowing if our data is good, but also putting you in a position of not having to babysit your backups, getting away from the days of making the table stakes easy, right? Kind of a cliche, right? Making backups easy so we can move on to the more innovative and fun things, right? Like reusing of your data. How can we use our data to spin up a virtual lab to test things like Windows patching? Like, is my latest Windows patch going to break my 10-year-old legacy application? Well, let's spin up a virtual lab and test it. So a lot of technologies like that, what we'll cover later on. All right, and then this all comes back to our original flagship product, Veeam Backup and Replication. Again, we're on version 10. And let's kind of simplify it. We do have other products which we will talk about at some point in time, but Veeam Backup and Replication is really kind of the meat on the bones, right? Why backup? Why backup? I realize maybe not everyone on the call deals with backups, but it does affect us all in some way or fashion, right? And kind of to Howard's point earlier, we have a concept of data sprawl. It's no secret that data continues to grow, exponentially even, right? It's exploding in data. I heard an article that said we're in the petabyte apocalypse, and I don't even know what a petabyte is. I think it's like 25 zeros, right? So data's growing, that's no secret. But also the compliance and strategy to really contain this data and protect it is also growing. So the mountain continues to grow. We need to get over this mountain. And as you know, we're living in an age where, we're certainly not perfect, right? Disasters happen all the time. It could be, man-made, it could be natural disasters, it could be malicious actors inside your organization as well as that, malicious attacks, right? So we want to be able to recover from these, right? Because these things never really happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, right? When you're in front of a desk, now you have something to do. You fix it, you're on your way home. These things actually happen more, when you're on vacation, right? When you're with your loved ones, right? And so the point is, how do we recover from these, if not it's when, activities? But how do we really make that process very smooth? How do we test it proactively and get you back, most importantly, getting your business up and running, but how do we get you back to the things that matter most, right? Because I don't know about you, but I did not love working overnight on the weekends for things like this. So the way we avoid disaster and really protection is something that us Veeam guys, we love to talk about, this 3-2-1 rule, right? We're always talking about it. Seems like it's always in a slide somewhere with Veeam. And this 3-2-1 rule actually came from, I believe it was a French photographer, probably 100 years ago. I think it was a French photographer. But he had this idea that we need to have multiple copies of our data in multiple sites so that if anything happened, like a fire or, something was stolen, we're not going to lose our data, right? So this concept of having 3 copies of production, first one being your production VMs, right? You have your production VMs up and running, but we want to back that up, and we want to back that up often. And then from that backup data, we want to copy even that data and get that onto another media type, right? Off of your production storage, put it on the secondary storage, maybe take that copy off to a cloud provider, maybe even tape if that's still relevant. It seems to be going away, but sometimes it's coming back, right? But the point is, we want to have multiple dispersed copies. We want to get one off-site, right? So that if we could take, even if our Veeam backup and replication server takes an outage, we just have that data somewhere that we can import that and start restoring, maybe from a Starbucks, right? Directly to Azure maybe, right? So it's these kind of conversations that we have with our customers. The way we achieve 3-2-1 is through our flagship product, again, backup and replication. But Veeam backup and replication is comprised of really 3 main components. And really, it's really just a Windows application. It's going to run on a virtual server or a physical server. And we're going to install it. It's going to take 30 minutes or so, give or take. And all these components are going to be self-contained, right? And the first one you'll notice when you launch the application is the Veeam backup server. This is going to be your console. This is going to be your brains. This is going to be the inventory, the control, the scheduling of your jobs, your day-to-day backup and restore. It's all going to be done through a nice UI. But once you're in this UI, you have the option, the ability to scale and deploy the ancillary components. So the second main component is the Veeam backup proxy. So if the first one is the brain, the second one is the arms or the heavy lift. These are the proxies which can be distributed throughout your environment, multiple data centers, multiple subnets, networks, you name it, that can actually mount these read-only disks say if it's a Hyper-V or VMware, and we're going to do some compression, we're going to do some dedupe, we're going to remove like-for-like blocks, and we're going to land that backup file on the third main component, which is a Veeam backup repository. So the backup file, many benefits of our backup file, but where we can store it is virtually, limitless, right? It's a file at the end of it. It's a folder at the end of the day. It could be Windows, virtual, physical, Linux, NAS device, deduplication appliance, cloud service provider, you name it. We're going to land it somewhere. And our backup files are self-contained. They're compressed, they're deduped, they're self-contained. Again, so if we lose our backup server, we can restore. We don't have a central database that we would have to rely on. 2, our backup files are very flexible and manageable. Get them off-site. So again, 3, 2, 1. And then ultimately, how do we leverage that data for some pretty cool innovative things? So just to put things in a high-level architecture perspective, we have a hypervisor of choice, maybe some physical servers. We're just going to install Veeam somewhere, and we're going to add that hypervisor, start scheduling some backups, and you're off to the races, right? Just point it somewhere, right? But these are scalable to really meet your organization. So is this just one server, or is this multiple proxies, multiple subnets, multiple networks, right? The freedom is up to you. Kind of bringing this home a little bit relevant with the DataON team and the storage-on solution. This is somewhat what we had success with. Worked with a project with Howard and Benjamin for one of my bigger customers here in Texas. Essentially, they were actually a VMware shop, right? But for reasons, right, it made sense to move to a Hyper-V platform, with this Azure Stack HCI. But they started protecting their data in parallel with this migration. So, and they actually leveraged Veeam to actually move these VMs to Hyper-V in a lot of cases. But really it gave them the greatest flexibility to start backing up, and then when they were at their desired end state, continue to move these off-site to maybe another DataON repository, and getting those data off-site through secure network, through strategic online systems, really architect this and really guide them down the right path. And then just ultimately, Veeam was just kind of the brains of data protection and orchestration of all of this, right? So really ultimately getting your backups, getting it off-site, and oh, by the way, we do replication as well. So if we need a tighter RTO, maybe fail some servers over, we can actually do that as well. So pretty exciting stuff for that always-on approach. And then just to talk again about our native backup files, our proprietary, our VBKs. So we always talk about our instant VM recovery, which we've had since 2010. Although I will say with version 10, we actually now have an instant VM recovery 2.0. But essentially what it is, it's our ability to mount our backup files in a read-only state, mount that into your hypervisor, and have that VM up within minutes, give or take. What's the storage is behind, right? Is it 2 minutes, 5 minutes? The idea is we're having that VM up and running as soon as possible. Users are connected, but then we allow Veeam to move that data in the background back to production storage. So the idea there is we may take it outage on a 10 terabyte file server, but do we want to move 10 terabytes off secondary storage back to production first and then fire it on and see what happens, right? We don't want to be in that state necessarily. We want to get this VM up and running ASAP, right? But again, the point is getting you back to your life, getting business back up and running. And again, we've had this technology for a while, but with 2.0, Instant VM Recovery 2.0, we're now talking not just one server at a time. We're now talking 5, 10, 15, 20 plus servers with Instant VM Recovery, and we're also doing it faster. So the idea there is, what if we might have applications that are physical, some are still virtual. Can we sandbox all of these and just get them up and running? But then we take this to the next level and say, how do we use this technology to do virtual labs, right? We may want to spin up multiple VMs from a backup file to do things like testing, right? Again, is a patch going to break application server? Or how creative can we be, right? What if we're backing up servers that have malicious code in them and they're not yet manifested and you take an outage, right? Your backup data was good because we got that on some sort of air gap storage, immutable storage, or it's securely locked down, but we don't want to restore an infected backup either. So leveraging this technology through another feature called Secure Restore, we can actually sandbox this, use up-to-date definitions on whatever antivirus you're using. Maybe it's a customized script. We can clean up and remediate that data before restoring to production. Just another example of kind of how we're re-leveraging that data. And one thing I will finish with here, this is from an extremely high level, everyone, it's not all about the instant VM recovery. We don't always have to restore an entire VM, right? Sometimes we just want to restore a file. We want to restore maybe an email, maybe a SQL table. Maybe I'm modifying group policy objects in Active Directory, and I just changed one thing, a little too much. Now you just can't log into the laptops. Giving these application owners the ability to not only have their entire applications protected from the ground up, but giving them the ability to restore application-specific objects and actually giving them like a user-friendly, a role-based access control to do so. So works friendly with everybody. Very exciting stuff. So that's just kind of summing up our story, on data protection, especially with Veeam Backup or Replication. Lot more exciting stuff we are doing at Veeam. But with that said, I will pause for now, and I will pass it over to Benjamin, and he will kind of tie this all together. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andy. And I have to say, with everything going on, I am so glad to be here to be able to do this conference with you guys. My name is Benjamin Clements. I'm the president of Strategic Online Systems. And just a real quick intro about me, similar to how Andy described, I was actually a DataON customer, and of course a Veeam customer, but I was a DataON customer first. And so it was back in 2016. I had a customer that I was doing and managing the enterprise SAN for. And I knew I needed to make a change. I needed basically the SAN product, like a lot of them, were bought out by a big name. And so then I was getting this pressure of upgrading to their more expensive SAN product. And all the while, I was watching Microsoft and their technologies for software-defined storage. And I was really intrigued by that. And again, back in 2016, I'm going back to all my normal vendors, because as an MSP, we were a long-time MSP back before it was popular to call it an MSP. So therefore, we had to do business with lots of vendors, lots of different technologies. And so I went back to my typical vendors, doing research on Microsoft software-defined storage at that time. And all research led me back to DataON. So, of course, called up DataON. Within an hour, they called me back. And after doing this project, I was so impressed with not just, their relationships with Microsoft and how they implement it, but, saw what they did and what they valued. And so I wanted my company to team up with DataON. And fortunately enough, we have become, since then, a close partner of theirs. And so like an extended part of their team. So therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what we're doing in real world as we work with DataON and work with Andy with Veeam, and what we're doing in the real world for a real customer, the one that Andy referred to. So, first I want to start with, before we decide what we're going to do, I think we need to go back to the basics and ask some questions. And I know we don't want to go back to our English class of who, what, when, where, and why, but I think it is important for this case. So we're going to talk about why this is important, who to partner with, of course, in my humble opinion, what technologies to use, and then how we provided a solution using those partners and technologies. So let's start with the big picture. The old fable of protecting the hen that lays the golden egg, that hen is pretty valuable. Your data is that golden egg that's being changed, being modified, being updated. It is very, very valuable, of course, to your business. But it's not just your data. Your data composes also your systems, your virtual machines, your physical servers. And then you combine all of this together that make up your processes. And so we want to protect that data at all stages. We need to think about that data being protected while it's in production, while it's being archived, where we're sending it to a disaster recovery site. And so then we want to make that data easily usable. It's one thing to make your data easily accessible. It's an entire different thing to make it easily usable as part of a system. But as we're thinking about that, we don't want to lose sight of ultimately we've got to protect our systems, okay? We've got to protect so that everything runs, at all times. So let's get a little bit practical here. what I like to define is the DR, the risk management, is anything that makes our services unavailable. So I like to think of it in 5 different categories. And by the way, I love the user damage, because don't we all feel like that at sometimes? We just want to kick it. But anyway, so let me start with ransomware. That's making the headlines, of course. And, I just want to think about ransomware in terms of any automated attack that basically is using user credentials to go and access any file that it can and corrupt them or encrypt them. And physical disasters, anything that physically prevents you from getting access to your equipment or takes out your equipment physically. We have fires and natural disasters here, but it could be, your sprinkler system goes off at the wrong time. You have a flood at your data center, main data center. User damage, deleted data, that's never going away. Somebody's always going to delete their Word file wherever it resides. Or, of course, VMs disappearing. Data corruption, we're going to have some OS issues. We're going to have faulty updates that have to be pulled back, and equipment failure. Power supplies go bad, spinning hard drives go bad, but even the NVMEs can go bad. So we still have to account for that. So anything that makes our services unavailable. So if we're talking about this, I think it's very important to ask the right questions, that we're going to choose partner technologies that, and let's start with this. First and foremost is data integrity, to protect our data. And what I want to say about this is we want to prioritize our integrity of data above even performance tricks that some HCI, some proprietary stands use, which are like, we first send the first copy in the memory or to a RAID cache or something, just so that we can send the acknowledgement back to our applications. But that's not prioritizing integrity, that's prioritizing performance. So first and foremost is data integrity. Then the second is providing infrastructure redundancy so that we're always anticipating hardware failures, because they are coming. The third thing that we need to keep in mind is that we're, like Andy said, we're always sending multiple copies of data, that 321, to different locations. We have to protect against physical disasters. The fourth thing, authentication air gaps. Also, Andy mentioned this. We have to protect against automated attacks that use a user credential to see any file that the user can see. Therefore, we have to have the capability of putting separate authentication domains. So if Active Directory is authenticating our cluster for our production, then we need to have a work group or a different Active Directory or some other authentication for our backup repositories, so that anything can't just automatically go and our exposure is contained. The fifth one, I think this is real key. Andy already mentioned it. The ability to spin up a VM from a point in time on demand. And in fact, even multiple point in times concurrently if necessary. The sixth one, supporting a hybrid cloud model. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, because it is recognized that some workloads work better and are more cost effective at certain locations like on-prem than others. Therefore, at that point you might zone out. I mean, certain industries have told me, certain companies have told me that their industry does certain things on-prem. However, the hybrid cloud is here to stay for nothing else than the flexibility. Even if you're currently only on-prem, if you choose the right partners, you'll have future options for integrating or consuming individual cloud workloads seamlessly, even if it's just one workload at a time. So it's still very important, even if you're all on-prem right now. And finally, choosing partners to support the latest technology quickly. So this is kind of that balance between, first and foremost, data protection, data integrity, but you're also wanting to support the latest technology, because it brings me back to a conversation back when I was talking with DataON the very, very first time. I was also talking with Enterprise SANs, and they were telling me, yeah, we're going to be supporting NVMe in a year, hopefully, when we change our software and change our hardware. There's just a lot of ifs. And right then, Microsoft was already supporting NVMe and RDMA. And if you look at the architecture for how a lot of proprietary SANs were working, you can understand why they were using SATA SSDs instead of NVMe's. But Microsoft has designed their ways of doing to support the latest technologies. So anyway, so answering the previous questions is the reason that DataON and as I'm talking on behalf of their extended team, that we bring together the technologies of these industry leaders to present a complete solution. Now, of course, we start with Microsoft. Why wouldn't you at least research the technology that runs Azure to see how well it could run your workloads on-prem? And of course, Intel's on this list. I mean, think about it. HCI. HCI is such a big deal, and Intel drives innovations in CPU, memory, and storage. So I bring you back to those are all three components of HCI. And by the way, you've got to go back. Howard already mentioned this is the fourth in a series. You've got to go back and listen to the third presentation where he's interviewing somebody from Intel about how DataON brings together those solutions to present incredible performance. Anyway, so DataON has closely partnered with Intel with their select solution lines, and they get those and then present them to Microsoft to get them certified for Microsoft for Azure Stack HCI. Also, Mellanox. Mellanox specializes in high-speed RDMA Ethernet for end-to-end solutions, you know, switches, interconnects, adapters. They start at 10 gigabit, but go all the way up to 200 gigabit. Yes, crazy fast. Now, normal high speed is one thing, but to go to the low latency that RDMA offers is quite another thing. And so no wonder why Azure chose Mellanox as a preferred NIC when building their internal infrastructure. And of course, Western Digital, they have the strength in large storage, enterprise disks, and bulk storage enclosures. And as Andy mentioned, you know, Veeam has been backing up VMs before many people were taking their enterprise servers to virtualization. Yeah, they were taking small servers, but we're saying, yeah, we don't want to take SQL or Exchange or anything like that to virtualization. Well, Veeam was already there backing up VMs, so they're not new to the game. That's the reason that all of these were brought together with by DataON and us as an extension of their team. So what architectures did we use to implement? And so as we go forward in the hows, just want to briefly touch on these. So answering the 7 questions. So starting off with the Microsoft Azure Stack HCI solutions from DataON, these are built to prioritize data integrity. Again, unlike in recent years where we relied on RAID card caches for write acknowledgments, the program managers at Microsoft made it their priority to not lose data. That's a thing that they always ask about when they're talking to us. They want to make sure that they're not losing data. They've also built it to anticipate and survive multiple failures. Now, everybody likes to do that. Everybody talks about that. But Microsoft takes a step further and says, hey, we want to get back to full redundancy whenever possible. So you think like every single free space becomes a hot spare, no matter what server. So it's constantly looking, if you have a hold node down, it tries to rebalance all of your data so you still have 3 copies everywhere. And that's happening automatically. And finally, even though Microsoft is thinking in data integrity first, they do support the latest industry standards. So they try and they play that balance very well, being one of the first enterprise storage solutions to support NVMe and RDMA for just incredible performance. And of course, as Andy talked about, the Veeam backup and replication is so critical because they are a software company. They're built to be flexible, to provide tool sets for a hybrid cloud environment, no matter where your data is. So they have built-in connectors to send data to multiple locations, whether it's your equipment or whether it's a CSV partner or whether you're going directly to the cloud, like going to Azure. they build it for multiple authentication air gaps. In other words, so that the same user credential that could be used on the production side cannot be used on the backup repository. And then finally, Veeam provides the ability to spin up these VMs from a point in time on demand, even multiple point in times concurrently. And as Andy said, you know, they can spin those up right where they are without having to restore them first. So the third part is the monitoring and management. Microsoft has made a big push to create a single pane of glass to do management. And so obviously Microsoft creates Azure Stack HCI to be hybrid cloud, to be ready to use a single pane of glass to manage your on-prem and your Azure resources. And then DataON extends Windows Admin Center with their Must tool. And this basically gives you additional tools to show you your exact DataON hardware, to show you exactly where any problems could happen, and to give you that full management of hardware in there. And then finally, the technologies that we use, well, as Microsoft Cloud Service partners, we're going to bring together all the resources and connections to bring together all the pieces, whether you've chosen to put your backup in DR on your equipment, in a colo, or in Azure. So for a real world, this project that we started for the customer that Andy was mentioning, we had three different main pieces to that. First was a hardware refresh. They were going from a proprietary SAN to Microsoft's Azure Stack HCI, of course, on DataON equipment. So on their primary data center, they had two clusters, one being a all-flash cluster, so very, very fast, and then the second was a hybrid cluster, which has more storage using flash as the first tier. And then 150 miles away was their DR cluster in a somewhat colo that they had full access to, that was also a hybrid cloud, not all flash, but had some, multiple tiers. And then combining it with DataON backup repositories on each side. So the second part of this was then we helped them to migrate from VMware over to Hyper-V. And as Andy mentioned, we use the tools from Veeam to do that, to make that migration to be pretty quick for most servers. And then finally, and we're still working with them on some of these things that have, COVID-19 has put a lot of things on pause, but we've already been working with them to set up their backup and DR failover, showing them how to do failover testing and validation, even showing them multiple ways to do testing so that they don't have to take down production systems to validate that a certain process that involves 11 different servers is still working and can communicate with each other just correct. So how did we do this? Let me go through real quick. Before you get into anything, a lot of people think that DR is a technology, but it's actually, we have to start with questions. We have to start asking ourselves, and I'd encourage you to ask yourself, for all the risks that you're looking at, you need to think about how likely is this particular risk or threat. We always know that somebody is going to delete their Word document, which is why all backup solutions make that easy. However, if your organization allows hundreds of IT workers domain admin access, then you better be prepared to also be able to restore entire VMs. How visible is your threat? Let's ask it a different way. How invisible is the threat? How long would it take you to discover that one of your servers has been corrupted by a virus or malware? If you have an archival system that you only have to use every 3 months or so, it might be 3 months before you saw that there was corruption of that server. So you need to make a note of that, and you need to identify that server as one that you need to keep for a very long time. How potentially devastating is the threat? I think that's obvious. Answers its own question. How quickly do you need to recover from the threat? Depending on what it is, we might have to incorporate some application level HA technology, like SQL availability groups, for just one particular piece, but then use Veeam for the rest of the backup, archive, and orchestration, and then use Veeam for all the other DR requirements. And then finally, identify related services. There's a lot of times that we have identified the SQL server, we've identified certain servers that are reliant on each other, but we forget something simple, maybe like the web front end. So if we didn't account for bringing up a web front end quickly, we might still have unavailability. So what I like to do is I like to think in terms of 4 quadrants where we're trying to identify our risks and we're trying to figure out how we're going to protect our data. So this is what we've done for, again, that real customer in Texas. So the 4 quadrants. 1 is our production cluster. 2 is our on-prem repository running Veeam. 3 is our off-prem repository running Veeam. Now that just means it's off-prem from 1 and 2. And the 4th is our DR cluster. Again, a physical separate location than 1 and 2, so that whatever physically affects us won't affect that location as well. So just real quick, I only have 4 slides left. So our production cluster, this is real important, writing 3 copies of our data before acknowledgement. So writing 3 copies to disk that even if we lose power for whatever reason, that data is there. It's not just in memory, it's not just on a cache. And because we use Azure Stack HCI, we can survive hardware failure and rebalance data very, very quickly. How quickly is it necessary? You want to rebalance data quickly until you have another threat. So they build this technology to rebalance, and that's a high priority with them. And then finally, because of Azure Stack HCI, it integrates with Azure for future expandability, for future features. So let's go to quadrant 2, the on-prem backup repository. We put this at the same local network as the production cluster, simply so that we can have minimal disruption of production systems while we're in that backup window. We want that to work as fast as possible. And then we also have fast recovery of recent data because it's right there where our production network is. And then finally, we introduced that authentication air gap. We introduced this repository that's on its own work group with totally different logins, totally different user credentials. So then our off-prem backup repository, it's a separate physical location. It serves as our long-term archival. It provides yet a third authentication air gap, so that if somebody does something very foolish, like opening up an email on this server, whatever they could get corrupted with will only be contained to here. It can't corrupt the other quadrants because they have that air gap. And again, we're using Veeam's best practice and their tool sets that make this possible. And then what I've talked about receives from on-prem backup repository, so that we can actually get those copies from the on-prem backup repository without affecting production. And finally, because of the tools that Azure Stack HCI and Veeam gives us, we are putting these Veeams ready to start on our DR cluster. And if you take a look at them, they just look like they are VMs that are off. And so we could go in to easily turn them on, but we actually choose to use Veeam's orchestration tools, because the orchestration tools from Veeam allows us to automatically re-IP, automatically give a new DNS IP address that is already sitting at our production, at our DR cluster. And because of the flexibility in hardware config, it doesn't have to be one-to-one. If there's somewhere that we have to save some money, we don't have to put as fast of a cluster at the DR side. So it doesn't have to be one-to-one, and because we have full control of it, we can have certain workloads always running on the DR side, like SQL availability groups, like an Active Directory server, like a DHCP server. So I just want to tell you thank you. I hope this helps. I hope we helped you start asking some of the right questions. I hope it gives you a feel for what can be accomplished today without locking yourself out of future expansion, all the while preparing for the hybrid cloud. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Howard.
Thank you, Ben. I really didn't want you to rush to those. I wanted you to take your time because what you had earlier for the last fourth slide to me was the key ingredient of building a right solution. Just because you have the right technology doesn't mean everybody knows how to implement everything correctly. And I really want to go back to your view of delivering that solution, because at the end of the day, it's how you implement it, how you make sure you put the security protocol in place using the existing technology to make happen. And I thought that was a very key part of our deployment and success with the customer. I think I will say I hope the customer's on, maybe he's on. They're happy with what we have. It was a 3-month project where we deliver the technology for the customer, we actually deliver the right solution, and you implemented the right solution for the customer to make sure they have the right backup and DR solution. And I think that's the very critical piece of our success as a team with a DataON, Veeam, and yourself to make that happen. Do you have any words for the customer, both Andy and Benjamin? I don't need to go through my slides, it's okay. But do you have any guidance for the customer today is looking at this presentation and says, okay, I'm looking at building a backup DR security. What are the highlights that you want the customer to remember, Ben?
I'm sure. I think it's going back and thinking about the different types of vulnerabilities that you need to protect against. Like, for instance, malware is on everybody's mind right now. So like this slide is very important, is that we do this authentication air gap. We use the tools that Veeam gives us to make sure that we contain any damage a malware can do, and that we have a second copy that's also an additional authentication air gap, so that, again, we have this containment. So we've identified we've identified and mitigated that malware risk. And then as we're thinking about, the physical risks, that's where we're getting multiple locations. So each of these quadrants, we're using these to address our different risks. And we're trying to think in terms of, we're anticipating what risk we're, avoiding, even separate things like if we're talking about our DR environment, it can take on multiple risks. It can take on a physical hardware failure. It can take on, a fire at our production environment. So it is taking on multiple risks as well. But you need to make sure that your 4 quadrants are addressing all of your risks, and we've done that for this customer.
Thank you, Ben. That was a very good summary. Andy, any advice for our audience as they continue to evaluate and looking at Veeam?
Really nothing too particular. Really just keep engaged with the community, what's going on, partner-wise as well as vendor-wise. We are, let us be the heavy lift out in the field here. Let us help guide and, bring you to the right solutions, especially. So we're here to help as early as often as needed. So I would say that, nothing too particular, but hopefully that helps.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Benjamin, for participating in the webinar. It was really informative in terms of information. I think it's something our customer has been eager to learn about, backup DR security, and it's something they care about today as something pressing. So really good content. And thank you for presenting. And this ends our webinar. And if you have any questions, and feel free to email us and call us, and we're here to help you and here to go through kind of what we learned with you so we can help you architect the right data governance solution. Thank you, everybody. This ends our webinar, and we're looking forward to you guys next time.